Ecclesiastes is one of my favorite books of the Bible because it deals with the existential crisis of the wisest man in history, King Solomon. In so doing, reveals, in a sense, everything true about human existence from that perspective. The tradition is that King Solomon, also called Kohelet in the book, wrote Proverbs when he was young and idealistic, Song of Songs in his middle age, and Ecclesiastes on his deathbed when he was old and cynical. And this fits in pretty well with the tone of the book. It deals with two of the most important questions. What objectively is the purpose of anything? It's all vanity and pursuit of wind. King Solomon is the richest and wisest man in the world, but he says, wine, mansions, vineyards, slaves, possessions, etc. I have them all, but what is the point objectively? It's nothingness. And implicitly, at least it asks, secondly, does questioning reality and human existence lead you to madness or to truth? And can you tell the difference, or are they same? So utter futility, says Kohelet, utter futility, all is futile. What real value is there for a man in all the gains he makes under the sun? There's nothing worthwhile for a man but to eat and drink and afford himself enjoyment with his means. But what objectively is the point of even that, even enjoying yourself? That too is futile in pursuit of wind. This is a serious problem. Kohelet is the richest and wisest king, and yet barring any teleology, any objective meaning or purpose, all human affairs are just absurd. We're like apes, and this point is made explicit later in the book. Why do we do anything? It's all just vanity and pursuit of wind. And pursuit of wind is a curious phrase. It's used maybe 15 or 20 times in the book, maybe more. It's a metaphor for being lost, because there's no place where wind is. It's just a thing that happens. There's no purpose, no teleology. Ecclesiastes says, southward blowing, turning northward. Ever turning blows the wind. On its rounds the wind returns. So pursuing wind, making an illusory thing your target, is the symbol of confusion. And wind is also the cyclic influence of time. Matthew Pageau points out in his book, The Language of Creation, that time, when properly integrated into a space-time cosmic order, is a regenerative force. But unless there's perfect spatial meaning and structure, it's destructive. It thrusts you forward into an unbearable future you didn't ask for and aren't prepared for. It destroys. And so when we lose the proper union of heaven, earth, space, and time, these divine patterns as symbolized by the Garden of Eden in the story of Genesis, where everything regenerates and evolves over time in a productive way, informed by higher spiritual meaning, which informs and kind of rearranges matter according to the power and pattern of spirit. When we lack this spiritual meaning, when we lack this spirit, what is the point of all of the cycle of happenings in nature and in human life? So this says there's a time for being born and a time for dying, a time for planting and a time for uprooting, a time for slaying and a time for healing, a time for tearing down and a time for building up, a time for weeping and a time for laughing, a time for wailing and a time for dancing, etc. It's all meaningless. It's all just things that happen. What value then can a man of affairs get from what he earns? Asks Kohelet. When we don't see ourselves as part of the divine plan, then why should we interfere with whatever God or time or fate or whatever you want to call it has in store? And this is presented by Kohelet rightly as a problem of determinism. God, he brings everything to pass precisely at its time without man ever guessing all that God brings to pass. The logical thing then, if everything is predetermined by God and we're just observers, we're not participants in God's teleology, is just to get out of his way. Kohelet thusly concludes, the only worthwhile thing then there is for them to do is to enjoy themselves and do what is good in their lifetime. And this is also germane to our modern, international finance, monopoly capitalist, monetary economy, this rat race, this etc., which is, by its definition, a system of transactions devoid of its telic economic dual, which represents the true meaning and purpose of human interaction, financial or otherwise. Money is a restriction of human utility to exclude all the transcendent aspects, and thus the accumulation of money and consumer products and even cars, houses, etc., it's vanity and pursuit of wind as well. And this was clear even thousands of years ago, but it's even more pronounced now because people feel like whatever will be done is preordained by the inscrutable mechanisms of globalized society, of mammon, of the powers that be, whatever you want to say, of fate, of randomness even, or chance, and it's all predetermined. Their forthright effort, it might produce output. It's producing, clearly some utility for at least their employers if they're continuing to pay them, but it produces no real value. So thus they've reached the same conclusion as Kohelet. The only worthwhile thing to do is just to enjoy life, accumulate whatever material treasures, drink beer, watch football, etc. And so if you think about all things, again, going back to this spiritual perspective, all things as some percentage earth / matter, and some part heaven / spirit, some part, substrate, and some part meaning. So the angels symbolically are heaven because they're pure, they're incorporeal vessels of spiritual meaning, and the beasts are earth because they have no higher rational will and only follow appetites and instincts. Without the higher spiritual meaning, Kohelet says, as regards men, I have decided to dissociate them from the divine beings and to face the fact that they are beasts. And this is emblematic of modern neo-Darwinism, which regards man as an animal, in essence, as opposed to the divine worldview, which sees human beings as the crucial link in the great chain of being from the animals to the angels. But when we lose that meaning, when we lose the great chain of being, the great chain of meaning, Kohelet says, man and beast have one and the same fate. As the one dies, so dies the other. Man has no superiority over beasts, since both amount to nothing. Again, without the higher spiritual meaning, we're resigned to concede that there's nothing better for man than to enjoy his possessions. Kohelet then touches on two more modern expressions of nihilism, Marxism and antinatalism in their pre-modern forms. And so he observes the tears of the oppressed with none to comfort them, and the power of their oppressors with none to comfort them. Again, when you separate economics from teleology, it's not just oppression, but, where some people benefit and some suffer. Everyone loses. It's a negative-sum game in a world without meaning, in an economy without meaning. And those who died long since, Kohelet says, are more fortunate than those still living, but happier still are those who were never born at all. Without a why, there is no way to forthrightly confront the tragedy of being. You were better never to have existed. We should envy people who have never come into existence, whatever that means. So all labor, skill, and skillful enterprise come from men's envy of each other, another futility and pursuit of wind. There's no way not to be cynical about all, even seemingly positive human endeavors, unless you are basically naive from Kohelet's view, that you think that there's something positive, something meaningful going on. So it says, the fool folds his hands together and eats his own flesh. It's the ultimate absurdity. That is existence at its essence. The snake eating its own tail. Total confusion to comical proportions. It's absurd, vanity, nothingness, pursuit of wind. Only this I have found is a real good, that one should eat and drink and get pleasure with all the gains he makes under the sun during the numbered days of life that God has given him, for that is his portion. And this is a formulation of the contemporary notion, of the contemporary maxim, YOLO. You only live once, and therefore, carpe diem, seize the day. This perhaps is the best we can make of nihilism, without any real meaning or purpose. We'll just say, just the best you can say is, just kick back, relax, and enjoy the ride. So halfway through the book, we've arrived at, let's call it an optimistic nihilism. We're halfway towards recovering meaning. So therefore, the escape beyond nihilism, even, optimistic nihilism, which is just, nihilism with a smiley face, is not more reasoning. Kohelet says, I thought I could fathom it, but it eludes me. I've pursued earthly wisdom all my life, but it's all illusory. So God made men plain, but they have engaged in too much reasoning. We're not meant for this kind of speculation. The way out of nihilism isn't to be a theory cell. It's an embodied form of knowledge. The answer is submission, to not try to probe into the mind of God, but to serve even though you can't rationally justify why love and devotion are better than their negation. And so, if you follow the commandments and do good deeds under the authority of God, then a king's command is authoritative, and none can say to him, what are you doing? Only one who obeys orders will not suffer from the dangerous situation. And so there's this story of The Lady of Little Faith by Dostoevsky, and she goes up to this very righteous man, this priest in the monastery, and she says, I suffer from lack of faith. I don't. And he says, do you suffer from lack of faith in God? And she says, no, I dare not even think about this. But this, life beyond. She's kind of skeptical about the whole enterprise, but she doesn't of, life after death, of God, of religion. She kind of has a similar perspective probably to Kohelet, that there's no way to objectively probe it. And she says, how can you prove to me that there is, anything beyond this material realm, basically? And the guy says to her, very interestingly, he says, by the experience of active love, by, if you really take care of your neighbor selflessly and devote yourself to others, to love and to service, then you get it's an embodied form of knowledge, and you start to almost you start to become the fact that God and life beyond life and, spirit exist. And this, it's not rationally formulated, but it can't be proven, it can only be shown to you. And so it's not that love and service, etc. will always result. So the intrinsic meaning comes from finding God through the service of others, through tireless and active love. It's not that this will always result in greater gain. This isn't Kenneth Copeland prosperity gospel preaching stuff. The sentence for evil deeds, Kohelet says, is not executed swiftly. Sometimes an upright man is requited according to the conduct of the scoundrel, and sometimes the scoundrel is requited according to the conduct of the upright. So, there's this, maxim, I don't know, it's from some, I think, African country, I don't recall, but it says, but it's this quote, and it's this woman, she says, she has an axe and she has a bucket of water, and she said, the person asks, why do you have an axe and a bucket of water? And she says, I want to take this water and pour it on the flames of hell, and take this axe and chop down the gates of heaven, so people will serve God not for want of heaven or for fear of hell, but because He is God. You serve God not for want of material reward or fear of material loss. This is a heresy. But because He is God, this is the true meaning of human existence. It's submission to the divine will, submission to the intrinsic purpose of why you are instantiated here in reality, that it actually has goals. So it says, it's a leap into faith. It's an embodied form of knowledge. You have to become that higher spiritual meaning, which then informs your existence and enlightens you to the existence of something transcendent, to God, to the divine. So back to, you can enjoy yourself. It says, go eat your bread in gladness and drink your wine in joy, for your action has been approved by God. But also, don't inquire into things beyond your reach. You don't want to endlessly confuse yourself. You want to tirelessly and actively love and follow God's commandment. If one watches the wind, he will never sow. If one observes the clouds, he will never reap. In some sense, this is actually pulling you away from your true task on earth. And so the final advice is, enjoy yourself while you're young. Follow the desire of your heart, and the glances of your eyes. Be led astray in a little bit. Have fun. Kick back. But know that you will be called to account for all such things. And thus, he finally concludes in the last sentence of the book, the sum of the matter, when all is said and done, revere God and observe His commandments, for this applies to all mankind. So, after careful Cartesian-style skepticism of pretty much all human existence, he comes to a fairly, intuitive conclusion. He says, you have to enjoy life. This is what Chris Langen said in his interview with Kurt Jaimungal and Bernardo Kastrup. He was asked, what gives meaning to your life? And it's, first and foremost, it's serving God and aiding in the fulfillment of God and reality's purposes, that there is actual ends which reality is trying to fulfill through you to actually, and to enact those and bring those into the world as a participant in reality, and you have certain moral obligations. So that's basically equivalent to following God's will or following God's commandment. But it's not only that, but and so that is the primary thing. But also, enjoy yourself. He says, what get the taste of a good meal. The love of his wife, his home, his pets, etc. A night drinking beer with friends, etc. You should enjoy life, but know that love mankind, follow God, and it's enough to remember that the law, that God's commandment rules over all. Let the light shine forth in the darkness. May the peace of our Father in heaven be upon you. Like and subscribe. Peace.